All right, Mr. Barrett, Sean Hannity here. Do you really believe that 9/11 was an inside job?
Okay, Sean Hannity. I never watched Fox News before, but within seconds of seeing this guy, you can just see that he is a snake. At least he is currently conducting himself as such. Now, this is pretty basic what he's doing. He's not giving eye contact. He's pretending to be bored with the guy's very presence. And this is a way to discredit him that way, as if he's just some sort of gnat and not even worth considering, and that's why he's purposely looking down and acting bored when he talks to him. Secondly, he uses the word believe. Do you really believe? To believe is not to know, and that's why he's stressing that. And again, you're going to start to see extreme manipulation from this Mr. Hannity.
All right, Mr. Barrett, Sean Hannity here. Do you really believe that 9/11 was an inside job, not just 9/11, but Madrid and Bali and the Zakawi operation?
Well, you know, actually...
hang on a second.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so what he does is he tries to take control of this conversation right away. He insinuates something, and the professor was smart enough to catch what he was saying, and then when he tried to respond to that, he interrupts him to take control. Now, notice, and I'll point this out in a little bit, when he puts his hand up in the OK sign, you're about to learn what that really means and what they use it for. But for now, just understand that that's how they'll do it. They'll insult you while they speak and try to continue speaking before you can actually reply to it. And therefore, it makes the professor look nuts. You know what I mean? Because if people don't catch this neuro linguistic programming, if they don't catch the manipulation, you know, which is comprises the majority of the audience anyway, nevertheless, if they don't catch it, then he can do that. He can take those cheap shots, and when the professor tries to correct those, then he interrupts him, says, hey, hold on, you know, and then tries to make him look rude for interrupting and take control over him and disrupt his thinking at the same time.
Well, you know, actually...
hang on a second.
Do you
believe personally that these are inside jobs, yes or no?
It's not quite that simple.
Okay, believe personally, that's another way to plant that into your psyche, that it is just he that believes this, and then he uses the yes or no trap, because that is, again, misleading if you can't see that. The way he twisted around that question would not allow the professor to be able to give a yes or no answer, because he injected manipulation into the question itself. So, when the professor tries to say that, of course, then it puts him under pressure. The professor is smart enough to catch that, and it isn't that simple, and he understands. The professor knew, of course, what I'm telling you right now. However, time is ticking. He only has so much time on the air, and their job is to disrupt his thinking as much as possible and make as many hidden accusations as they can and as many subconscious embeds into how to perceive the professor as they can in the short amount of time that he's on the air, and that's their only job, is to discredit and disrupt. Okay? But he did catch it. Now he has to respond to that rather than being able to say anything that matters. And that's what they do. Another good person at this is Stephen Colbert. If you watch Stephen Colbert with any of his interviews, his whole job is to discredit and disrupt. That's what he does, and you keep it moving. It's very, very petty, but these are the people that you allow to run you, okay? So know that, and that's what's going on right here.
Yes or no?
It's not quite that simple. I do know, I don't believe, I know that 9/11 was an inside job. Professor Stephen Jones has found residue of fermate on the steel samples from the World Trade Center. We now know that it was taken down in a controlled demolition.
All right, so you believe that the buildings came down in a controlled demolition?
Okay, so the professor did a really good job of identifying his manipulation by saying, I don't believe, I know. And because he was starting to get through that, Hannity interrupts him and says, I don't have a lot of time. Well, wait a minute, you just asked him a question, and now he's able to break through your manipulation, and suddenly you don't have a lot of time for the very answer to the question that you just asked. The next thing you see, he asks him, what evidence does he have? And he interrupted him giving the evidence to ask him what evidence he has. Why? Of course, he's not interested in hearing the evidence or anybody else hearing it. He's interested in interrupting him and planting another embed into the psyche that what he happens to be saying right now is somehow not evidence. It's all misdirection of focus, redirection of focus, disrupting, interrupting, gaining control, and, you know, it's this very petty, they rely on these petty techniques.
A controlled demolition.
All right, so you believe that the buildings came down in a controlled demolition, right?
Well, I don't believe it. I've looked at the evidence,
you're right,
the evidence is overwhelming.
All right, the evidence is overwhelming to you because you're a conspiracy nut, but
no,
you know,
actually, all
that
of you,
aside,
I ask your viewers to take...
Okay. Now, in this one, I'm sure you caught the obvious part, but you probably did not catch the neuro-linguistic programming. What exactly is neuro-linguistic programming? Simply put, it's dual meaning that is speaking to the subconscious. Now, of course, he's shaping public opinion by saying, it's obvious to you because you are a conspiracy nut. Well, remember now, people are very phobic of being called anything that goes against the norm. So if you agree with him, oh, then you're a nut, and people, you know, they can't escape their own ego. So that's used to shape him. What you probably didn't catch is him saying, but, you know, putting that all aside, this is neuro-linguistic programming. Now, pay attention here. You're a conspiracy nut, but putting that all aside, what that is doing is he's directing your subconscious mind and your conscious mind to store that label, that impression of him. Put it aside. Keep that. It's called anchoring. In neuro-linguistic programming, because I've watched a little bit of it, I didn't need to watch it to pick up on how they do this, but it allows you to get some of their terminology down. They call this anchoring. Anchoring a thought, anchoring a concept, anchoring a feeling. Putting all of that aside means put that aside in your mind. He's a conspiracy nut. Do you see how they manipulate you? That's a very good lesson right there in neuro-linguistic programming.
all right, the evidence is overwhelming to you because you're a conspiracy nut, but
no,
you know,
actually, all of you,
aside,
I ask your viewers to take a look at this evidence for themselves. They can go to st911.org. That's Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Take a look. Take a look at the demolitions.
I know you
Morgan Reynolds, a former Bush administration official.
Okay, that's pretty obvious. You see how he's treating him. Very nonchalant, irritated, bored. And I know you think you're the smartest guy in the world. This is, you know, the typical you're a know-it-all type of comment. If you watch that David Icke video where he goes back on Wogan, he draws attention to the same thing where he said, whoa, that's a cheap shot when he said, you know it all. And the response was accurate. I'm not saying a know-it-all. But people are trained to hate people who, quote, know it all. Why? Because they want you to be dumb. That's why in society you have catchphrases that go around that people use, like, you think too much, you're too deep, you know it all. These have all become derogatory terms in this new Orwellian society. Haven't you noticed that? His response is petty and childish, but he means to be this way. It does nothing, it addresses nothing. He can't think of anything to say in response to the professor, so he has to take a cheap shot like this. I know you think you're the smartest guy in the world. That should be obvious to you, that is just overdoing it, creating, manifesting an insult, just, again, for one reason and one reason only, to disrupt his thinking and to program your mind on how to view him.
Take a look at the demolitions.
I know you think
Morgan Reynolds, a former Bush administration official, says that the Bush administration blew the World Trade Center to kingdom come. That's a direct quote from a member of the Bush administration itself.
I know.
They blew the World Trade Center to kingdom come. The Jews were
told to leave. Well, we've heard a lot of these sick, bizarre theories.
Okay, so suddenly he's an anti-Semite? When did that come about? I didn't hear him say anything about the Jews. What he's doing here is he's trying to link him to anti-Semitism. That's what they want to do. Now, anybody that's really trying to speak the truth in this world has no interest in focusing on a group or even an individual. What they try to focus on is the problem in general, outside of any group or individual that may be manifesting the symptoms of the problem. But again, what he's trying to do here is, in your mind, link the professor to being part of a hate group, someone that's going to target a group or an individual and make you link the terms sick and bizarre to the professor. He didn't say anything about the Jewish community. Nothing. So catch that. See how he's trying to link the professor to it.
The World Trade Center to kingdom come. That's a direct quote from a member of the Bush administration itself.
I know.
They
and there
the
were
World
people
Trade
that
Center
said
to
that the
kingdom
Jews
come.
were told to leave. Well, we've heard a lot of these sick, bizarre theories.
That's
and I
not
don't
the
believe
same
any
thing.
of them, but you're allowed to believe what you want, but that's not what's at hand here.
Okay, now another thing, just to make you aware, again, of just how much they're programming your mind. To you, it looks like a man that said that's not the issue at hand here. You need to start learning their language. Their language is dual meaning, which goes hand in hand with Neuro Linguistic programming. The issue at hand here, what he's doing is directing the professor to look at his hand. Now, why would he have the professor look at his hand? Well, if you look at his hand right now, you see it as what you've been told is the OK sign, right? Well, let's show you what it really means.
I don't really care what you believe, but if we're talking about a captive group of students in a classroom, the question we've got to
captive.
Hang on a second. Well, they're sitting in your classroom, and you have a position of authority. I'm wondering, the question is whether or not you're the most competent to teach them. And most people think you're a nut.
Now, this one should be obvious. Isn't he a person that's in a position of authority? And isn't he about as incompetent as you can get as far as love and honesty and caring about other life forms? Yet he turns it around because people believe what they hear and what they read. So if he says it first, and that's a big part of this, is trying to say things first before somebody else can say something, then it seems like they will always be on the defensive. And that's the whole point, is to keep the professor on the defensive. All right? And saying that he is detrimental to his students, when the truth is Fox News is incredibly detrimental to you, just in this short clip I'm showing you here, and people are watching this all day long.
And most people think you're a nut. Most people think your views are not even worth listening to.
We just had a poll here in Madison, and we found that 90% of the respondents at Channel 3000 poll said that I should be allowed to teach. Only 10% said I shouldn't.
That's the question
and 60%,
I don't think what your views are.
agreed with me about the questions I'm raising about 9/11. 60% of the respondents.
I think
you're in the minority.
Right to speak. I don't think this is the proper forum, though, for people that hold extremist views like yourself.
Okay, first of all, when he says no, no, like that, what he's doing is he's programming the television viewers' collective consciousness to disregard the results of that poll. He says no, no, and then your mind says no to the information he just gave. These are just little tricks he slips in there. And most people think he's a nut? What? But see, people watch that, of course, and they store that in their mind as fact. Of course, most people do not think he is a nut. But if he says that, he programs anybody watching this television program, hint, hint, that everybody thinks he's a nut. So I will too, to fit in. Where did he get that number? How does he know most people think that he's a nut? Think about it. They don't. He just says it, and then the professor has to respond to that. He's totally disrupting the whole interview. So it appears to people, because time is moving by, that there's actually an interview going on here. But it's not. It's only about disrupting and discrediting and programming your opinion.